play? Can you play? Well, good afternoon. We're going to get started with a couple songs, then we'll get into the program. Is there a volunteer pianist?
I think you just love it.
There's one somewhere. Back row, perhaps.
Sing number 8 first and then do In the Garden.
You pick.
Is that okay?
Number 8, We Gather Together.
And then we'll do In the Garden.
We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens His will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to His name. He forgets not His own. Beside us to guide us, our God with us joining, ordaining, maintaining His kingdom divine. So from the beginning of heart we were winning, the Lord was at our side, all glory be thine. We all do extol Thee, Thou leader triumphant, and pray that Thou still our defender will be. Let Thy congregation escape tribulation, Thy name be ever praised, O Lord, make us free. Let's turn now to number 487, In the Garden. That's what we're here to talk about. 487. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear to number 560, Let All Things Now Living. 560. That one. Let all things now living a song of thanksgiving to God the Creator triumphantly raise, who fashioned and made us, protected and stayed us, who guided us on to the end of our days. His banners o'er us, His light goes before us, a pillar of light shining forth in the night. Till shadows have vanished and darkness is banished, as forward we travel from light into light. His lobby enforces the stars in their courses, the sun in his orbit radiantly shines. The hills and the mountains, the rivers and fountains, the deeps of the ocean proclaim him divine. Rejoicing our love and rejoicing glad adoration, a song let us raise, till all things now living unite in thanksgiving, God in the highest, Hosanna and praise. Please turn to the next page. This is a song that most of you may not know, but it's about gardening. 561. It's called We Plow the Fields. Raise your hand if you know it. That's what I thought. Most people don't know that. Okay. Well, we want you to learn it. So please follow along and try to catch on. 561.
Are you okay with playing that one, Cosmin? Or do you want some help?
He's got it. You pick the key, any key. That I can sing. We'll try it. We plow the fields and scatter the good seed on the ground, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. He sends the snow in winter, the warmth to swell the grain, the breezes and the sunshine and soft refreshing rain. All good gifts around us are sent from heaven above. Then thank the Lord, oh thank the Lord for all his love. He only is the maker of all things near and far. He paints the wayside flower, he lights the evening star. The winds and waves obey him, but him the birds are fed. Much more to us, his children, he gives our daily bread. All good gifts around us are sent from heaven above. Then thank the Lord, oh thank the Lord for all his love. We thank thee then, our Father, for all things right and good. The seed time and the harvest, our life, our health, our food.
else very important to our gardens is the rain. Let's sing showers of blessing. Does anyone know what number that is?
195. 195. There shall be showers of blessing. This is the promise of love. There shall be seasons refreshing, sent from the Savior on high. Showers of blessing, showers of blessing we need. Mercy drops from the storm, but for the showers we there shall be showers of blessing, precious reviving again, over the hills and the valleys, sound of abundance of rain, showers of blessing, showers of blessing. Mercy drops in the surf but for the showers we
Last verse, 195.
there shall be showers of blessing. Oh, that today they might fall. Now as to God we confessing, now as on Jesus we call. Showers of blessing, showers of blessing we mercy drops from the surf but for the showers
Well, it's a blessing to see so many people here today. It's after a nice walk and sure and a great lunch for those that were here for potluck. At this moment, what we're gonna do is those that want to have their children to be kind of take care about the young people that are gonna be helping them down in the basement. This is the time. The group is in the back. Girls, can you stand up? Yep. And so you want to send your kids with them. They're the one that will be taking care, entertaining the kids and help them while you guys have the seminar today. There's a lot of kids. I guess it seems like half of the crowd was kids. It seems to be empty. Anyway, what's up? So anyway, so we're gonna welcome you guys to be here with us. This is I guess, the first of many that we want to have a garden seminar, and many of you guys, I'm sure, have not had the experience of maybe having a garden, or maybe had the desire to have one. I guess this will be the seminar. There will be three, actually, there will be 4 presenters. We you got one of them, and we have Danette, we will have Elizabeth, and we have Mark Heisey. They're going to be presenting the basis of how to start a garden, but most important, the importance of and the benefits of why it's important to have a garden. So, if you don't mind, I would like to have a word prayer to start. So let's have a word prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful day they give us, for we could feel spring and the warm weather start to be around us. And that tells us there's time for start our garden. And we ask you to be with us, continue to guide our heart and our minds. And the presentation is always be directed by you. In the name of Jesus, amen. Amen. Okay, so the benefits and importance of having a garden today. Well, I've have a few reasons why we should grow and we should have our own garden. The first one is that, growing your own garden and your own food for food security and be able to have your own food. In hard times, the family can be greatly helped by growing a high productive garden food. It might a time where we might need to grow our own food, especially with time come and difficulties start probably appearing. I had some friends, actually co-workers that work in Houston, Texas. You guys know there was this front that came, the cold weather, and kind of paralyzed everything. And and some of my co-workers, they kind of mentioned to me that they went to the supermarket and there were absolutely nothing. Everything was wiped out. For a few days, they didn't have anything to eat. So realistically, a disaster could happen to many of us. And what a blessing would be if we have our own garden and be able to have our own food to survive. Another reason or benefit to have a garden is because, you'll be able to save money. Who's kidding? How expensive food is getting out there in the store today? The cost of food, especially organic products, is going way high. For fresh and greatly tasty organic grow, that is a fraction of the price that you pay at the store. Also, one seed is between 3 to 10 cents. So you do that, you start growing. So you plant and you buy a seed that is very cheap. You pretty much could save a lot of money when you buy your own, when you plant your own food. If you plant well, you can have food not only for the summer, but early months, but also through the winter's month. And as you can see, probably we're not going to get into that. I don't know if the other presenter will be, but there's a way that you could preserve your food and have plenty of food for the rest of the year. Another way that could benefit your family is a family character builder or children development. Numerous studies have shown that garden-based education improves academic performance and may lead to a higher test score, especially in the area of math and science, with overall improvement on the standardized achievement tests and improved positive attitude towards learning. Also teach children to garden, give them immeasurable life skills of independence and sustainability while encouraging them to eat more vegetable as well. The daily activity in the garden can become an excellent family time that is communal project to encourage team building and independent skill. Another part is it could be a personal time. Garden provide an outlet for your own personal time. Take the time for yourself to decompress for the daily life activity and have a place to go just to let your thoughts flow and your mind wander. A butterfly can do that, so can you. What a blessing, right? And that's my dog, Marley, enjoying the time there. Yes. Another benefit will be you have a business opportunity. The love of plants can lead to a rewarding job at the local garden center or a large landscaping firm if you want to work for somebody else, or to own your own business, maybe to go to a marketplace, whether you could sell your product. Whether you grow flower, vegetable, or herb, there are opportunities to sell your products at the local farmer market or a craft show or even to your neighbors. Also, there's it's good for health. When you could have sunshine that go to your body, air, and exercise. If you cannot get to the gym, well, get a workout without even thinking about it. Gardening activity provide both cardio and aerobic exercise. A study shows that an hour of modern day gardening can burn up to 300 calories for a woman, almost 400 calories for a man. For older people, especially women, gardening can help reduce osteoporosis. Mowing the grass is like taking a vigorous walk, bending and stretching the plant to a garden compared to exercise class. While holding plants and soil is similar to a weightlifting, adapting to help those physically limitation prevent some activities. Exposure to sunlight and fresh air help the body to naturally produce vitamin C. Another benefit is garden could add beauty to your place. And house with a nice yard is a pleasure to look at and satisfied to live in. Your home can be made more inviting simply by adding a container of colorful near the front door. Herb in the kitchen add freshness as well as flavor to a daily meal. Trees and scrubs not only provide color and shade, but shelter for birds and wildlife. Another one, and I think this is my last one is that garden for emotional needs and spiritual connection. Garden play an important part in our well-being. Garden might serve as a tranquil retreat and private escape from the demand of everyday life. The beauty of flower can lift spirit, while pulling weed can be a great release of stress and exercise energy. A harvest of colorful flower or tasting vegetable provide a sense of achievement or feeling of success. While neighbors and visitors often spread their appreciation of those efforts, on another high level, gardening provides a spiritual connection to our God, our Creator. It is a miracle to take a tiny seed, nurture it, and watch it grow into a beautiful flower or a delicious food on the table. So as we can see, there's a lot of benefit to start having a garden. Now, I'm not the expert. I'm just, like I said before, I'm not a city boy. I'm a guy that came from the city. The only thing I used to plant back in my house in Florida was pineapples and let the mango grow by himself and the avocados. But when I came here, I learned a lot from a lot of the people and realized how important, because at the end of the day, we cannot have living in a nice country, have a nice piece of land without not be able to grow. You know, gardens improve relationship and compassion. Research showed that people who spend extended length of time around plants tend to have better relationship with each other. This is due to a measurable increase in feeling of compassion, another effect of exposure or to a ornamental plants. God wants you to have plants not only for your own take of eating, but also for be able to be a blessing, be able to have wonderful things that benefit you health-wise, and also be able to have sustained for the future that we are to come. So at this point, I'm going to invite the next one, and that will be Nanette. And now the experts start getting into the part of how to plan. My part was just the introduction.
I'm not an expert. No. And actually, this is my first time speaking in since I was in college, so I'm feeling really nervous. So hopefully I will be relaxed. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. If you don't know my name is Nanette, and I'm a member of this church. David said he wanted us to talk about our passion about gardening, and I'm really passionate about gardening. I absolutely love it. And I hope that as I present to you that you can see that you're totally capable and there's a lot of blessings to be had. I think my first gardening experience was in 1994. I went as an ASU student and they had an organic gardening class. It was really cool. We did it during the summer. And so we put in raised beds and learned a lot of different things about organic gardening. But for me, when I'm first having information presented to me, it tends to like all hit me at once and then I only keep a little bit. And that might be how it is for you. As you learn about gardening, I just want to encourage you. You might end up getting a lot of information and get overwhelmed, but don't be. Just keep one little bit. And you keep adding those little bits and little bits and little bits. And before you know it, you actually know something, which is really cool. And then I guess we had a tiny little house and I had a little garden there. It was in a bad location. It was actually where the people who lived before had thrown all their rocks from their other garden that was above. So I kept wondering why every time I dug, I had rocks and more rocks and more rocks. And it was because gardening actually on their old rock pile. But believe it or not, I actually got some kind of harvest. And then we moved out to Creston. A lot of you who met me, this is when I started coming to the church, remembered this place. So this was our garden that I had here. I'm the main gardener in the family. My husband doesn't love it, but he's the fence builder. And so he builds my fences and I plant within them. So we had a really enjoyable experience gardening here. And I will tell you something, these are 4 of my children who are grown up now. And we also raise dairy goats here. Gardening is a great thing. And I think Elizabeth's going to talk about this. Gardening is a great thing to do with children. They already love being dirty. They love like messing around and digging. And so this is something that they can do. And they really like all my kids liked planting a seed and then watching something come up. All of them went through times where they had little plots where this was their garden. It usually ended up being a weed patch because like halfway through the growing season, they didn't really want to care for it. But they really enjoyed it. And the one thing that I will tell you, pumpkins are great to grow with kids because they're really easy and they're really big. And then we moved to Tanzania and I led out there in a gardening project with the elementary school kids. This was totally different gardening. I had to learn, it's Southern Hemisphere. I had to really learn a lot of different things. The soil is totally different there. We are so blessed with the soil we have here. There, it's very, very porous. It would not rain for 8 months of the year. I had young kids helping me garden. It was very hard for me to get them to keep the carrots in the ground long enough to get bigger than my pinky because they were hungry and wanted to eat them. But they also taught me a lot of things like how to grow sweet potatoes. You could just take the little vines, stick it in the ground, and it would just grow. It was amazing. That was a great experience. We planted avocado orchards, and I did a lot of dairy goat husbandry while I was there. I've always gardened with animals. They provide a great, when you want to look at like, I guess, farming, it's a beautiful cycle, I think, when you add in animals. Then we moved back in the Creston area. This is Kayla and I putting up a deer fence around our back garden. I have raised beds there and then a bigger area in the back where I grow more field crops. This was the most beautiful broccoli harvest I've ever had. Doesn't that just make your mouth water? Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. I've never had broccoli that big. I mean, this is one head. You know, it's incredible. I don't know what I did. I'll be honest with you, but it was a real blessing. That's Ezra. So as I've been gardening, I've realized I always look for similarities. That's how my brain puts things together. And I noticed that as I'm gardening and the philosophy I have with gardening, it really matched up with God's design for health and life. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but God in his design of the universe has put in laws about how things work. Like one that you may think of would be like the law of gravity, right? Like on this earth, we understand we have gravity, right? Yes? Okay, I want this to be a little interactive. So if I have this thing of markers, what's going to happen? What do I know is going to happen no matter what without being in some kind of void? What's going to happen when I drop this? Right. We know what to expect, right? That's just what's going to happen. That's like a law, right? We know what to expect. Well, as I've grown as a Christian and as a person, I've also come to realize that God has design laws for everything. And the more I gardened, I realized, wow, there's like, he has a design. And if I work with his design and follow how he wants to have things done, I reap great fruit. So instead of trying to take and wrest something out of the soil, I can work with what he's put there and nurture it and develop it, and it naturally is going to produce good fruit. And one of the things I noticed most of all was we have a teaching in this church, which is awesome, to simplify rules for health. It's called the 8 Health Laws, right? Some people are familiar with this. And we use an acronym. Can I use your markers? We use an acronym for this called New Start. And I'm going to go over my gardening philosophy based on New Start. Oh, thanks. That's better than using my hand like I usually do. Okay. I'm familiar with this. Okay, so for some of you you're not. This is just an acronym to help us remember, right? So New Start is based on laws for health that if you follow, in general, you'll enjoy good health. It's just how the body was made to work, right? So we have nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust. And as I was looking at these and have thought about these, I realized that's exactly what a garden and plants need. And it really should have been a no-brainer, because when I look at scripture and I realize that God took the dust of the earth and blew on it, gave his breath of life, and he made man and woman. There should be a lot of similarities I would see between the living realm, the soil, and myself. And I see it over and over again. And it's really cool to think about as you're gardening, because you can think, when you come up to a problem, you can ask yourself, where am I messing up in this? Why am I having some kind of disease or lack of fruit? And you can go right back to this and try to find it, figure it out, okay? Everybody with me so far? Okay, so the first one is what? N stands for? Nutrition. Okay, why does the human body need good nutrition? You can just tell me, just speak out.
That's the fuel God made us to run on.
Okay, it's how our machine needs to work well, right? What happens when we don't get good nutrition? We get disease, weakness, right? Maybe other problems. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. This is found in Genesis 1:29. God gave us everything we need for good nutrition, right? Something that's really interesting is when you look at plants, is plants need a lot of the same nutritional things, a lot of the same macro and micronutrients that the human body also needs to be healthy. You can see here a picture of the human body listing all kinds of nutrients that it needs, like things for important bones or things, just all kinds of things. And you also see the same things in the soil here, and then also what the plant needs here. But then you ask yourself, how am I going to know how to give a plant good nutrition? Well, let me ask you this. How can you tell if a plant doesn't have good nutrition? Like what kind of symptoms? Maybe brown leaves, maybe crinkled up leaves, maybe yellow leaves, maybe deformities. So the similar things that happen in our bodies when we're not receiving good nutrition, you're going to see the same thing happen in your garden. Okay, a good way to check for basic nutrition in your soil is you can get a soil test. Who here has ever done a soil test? Who here does a soil test every single year? I'm just curious. Do you do one every year? Okay, I don't need it. I feel guilty, like, oh, I didn't do one. I forgot again. Okay, a soil test is a great way to start, because you'll get a printout, and I'm going to go more into this next Sunday when we get more into like the workings of how everything is, but it gives you a readout of what different levels are. And often you can either call the place that's done the soil test, and they'll walk you through what you may need to add. And if they're really good, if you measured your garden space, they can even tell you exactly how many amounts, because I make them go over it with me. Really understand. I figure they're going to work for their money. So they're going to really tell me exactly what I need to do. And there's all different ways that you can amend the nutrition in your soil for your plants. Compost is probably my favorite thing to use in the garden. You can produce it at home. You see things that you recognize, right? What's so cool about compost, especially when you do it at your home, is you're taking scraps of things that you really don't know what to do with, allowing the microorganisms to break it down into easily used particles for then the things in the soil to use as you add it in the plants. It's really a beautiful circle. So there is no waste. Some people use animal manures. I use quite a bit of animal manure when I have animals. Right now I have chickens. So I'll take, after I clean out the chicken coop, I'll take their droppings and the bedding and I compost that, which means I let it decompose. I let it start breaking down. So then I can add it to the soil to help feed the soil. What's really cool also is there's other rock powders and different kinds of fertilization and things that you can use to balance out your soil. I like to add it to my compost pile. So then it's all being broken down in a way that's very easily assimilated into the plants. And one thing to think about when you think about nutrition, you're not just feeding the plant. You want to feed the soil. There's such a world in the soil. And I'm going to be presenting, I hope, a little bit about soil next time because I'm so into it. Because when you start learning about human health and the human gut biome that's here in our bodies, it's a total mirror of what's actually happening in the soil. And it gets me really excited because I think God is so cool. Like, as you understand one thing, you understand another thing. You cannot, his creation is just so amazing how he works. Okay, that's just a little bit about nutrition, but I'm going to go in a lot of these topics I'm going to go into in greater detail. I'm just laying out right now the philosophy of how I look at gardening. The next one would be what? What do you think this E stands for? Exercise. Okay. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain. 1 Corinthians 9:24. David talked a little bit about this. We get exercise with gardening, right? Yeah. Anyone ever dig a hole before? Yeah. You get exercise. Pushing big wheelbarrows of whatnot, mulch or whatever, or weeding, right? You get a lot of exercise. Did you know that the ground also needs some exercise? What's really interesting when you're putting in a garden, and there's a lot of different philosophies. There's so many different philosophies of how to garden. But often in cases, it can be very good to break up the soil, okay? It can be very good to allow more oxygen in, to stir up nutrients, to make it so you can get the things out that you need to, like if you have big boulders or things that are going to get in the way of root growth. It can be very healthy to exercise the soil. Actually, I'm moving my gardens most likely into a no-dig. I'm slowly moving into a no-till philosophy with my gardening because I feel like it would be better for the soil health and longevity. But I will tell you, I love digging. Like, I know it sounds weird, but like, I've had a bad back. It's been out for 3 weeks. I've been in excruciating pain. I'm now feeling really well. And so what did I do yesterday? Well, I needed to make new strawberry beds. So I'm out there hoeing and raking. I just love working in the soil. But I think in certain cases, especially when you want to get rid of perennial weeds and things like that, digging can be very helpful for soil health as well. Okay, now we're doing W. What do you think W stands for? Water. Actually, I didn't write any notes on water. Interesting. Okay. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. John 4:14. Okay, do we need water? Why? Because we are water, right? Matthews, do you remember what percentage of water we are? 50 to 60%, okay.
Washes out toxins, helps your body metabolize. Those nutrients be moved from one place to another.
Right, that's great because that's actually what is also happening in the soil. All our basic body processes need water. All plants need water, the right amount, and the soil needs water. You can overwater, which can, what Monica was saying, it can flush, you can have enough water so those nutrients can move. So in the soil, you have open air pockets, you have granules of things coated with water, and this helps everything move within this area. Water is very, very important. Plants need water to begin to grow, right? You guys know what ground looks like without enough water? Exactly. And what's so sad about this picture is we know, okay, no plants are going to grow here, right? But what we don't realize is all the microorganisms and things under here have kind of been shut down. They also need to have water and the right amount of water because they're really like the factories that are helping everything kind of work well. I can't really express to you how important soil life is for your garden. One of the ways that we can ensure that we have adequate water that's also gently reaching plants and the soil biome is to simply put a cover like compost. Who here composts or puts mulch on top of things to mulch? Yeah. Do you notice a difference when you do that? What do you notice when you use mulch? Right? What else? Okay, there's less weeding. That's awesome come June, right? Like it's all beautiful right now, but come June is another picture, right? We don't have to worry about drought. Actually, because I use a lot of mulch, I'm a heavy mulcher, I don't water my garden. Like I'll water when I first put out seedlings or maybe first I'm laying out seeds, but after that, I don't water. I just mulch. And what's really cool about mulch, and I'm not gonna go in, I'm sorry, if I talk too long about things, I just get excited. What's really cool about mulch is then this is food for the things living in the soil who then break it down, who then turn it into soil. So you're constantly feeding. This is a feeding system. Water is very, very important, but you also don't want to overwater. A lot of new gardeners can tend to overwater. They think, oh, my plant needs something, I need to water it. Plants just need just enough. And it's actually, I tend to think it's less than you actually think they need. Okay. S. Sunshine. We need sunshine, don't we? Did you guys not feel that this past week? Every time I go through February and then the sun comes out again, I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord, for sun. It just, don't you feel energized? You know, you could hear the birds singing and you could see now the flowers are coming out. You know, it's just so cool. We need sun for a lot of things, for our mental health, but also we need sunshine for our physical health, right? We want to make vitamin D. We need sun. But the path of the just is as the shining light that shines more and more unto the perfect day. I want to be like that. I want to be the shining light. Gardens need sunshine. This is something you want to think about when you're deciding on where to plant a garden. You don't want to put it in a place that's maybe behind your house. It maybe gets sunshine in the winter, but maybe doesn't get any sunshine in the summer. All plants need some amount of sunshine. There are plants that you can plant in your garden, your brassicas and some other things that don't need quite as much sun. But in general, you want to think, my plants need sunshine. They need sunshine because they need to do photosynthesis, right? It's part of how a plant makes some of its own food. So it's very, very important. So when you're planting crops, you want to think about like how many daylight hours maybe does this crop need? Or how long is this crop going to take before I'll get a harvest because the daylight hours are going to change. One example is this. When I moved to Tanzania, I brought American sweet corn because I knew that they just grew a field corn there. And I was thinking, I want sweet corn. So I planted it. Well, in Tanzania, the sun comes up around 6:30 and goes down around 6:30, which is different than the summers that we are here. We have actually longer days in our summers than I had there. So my corn grew about this high. So some of the gentlemen who are Tanzanian who work there for me, who are basically our children's uncles, they didn't laugh in my face, but they did say, you know, Tanzanian corn is like this high. So they did say, oh, this American corn, do you guys plant this short American corn because it's like easier to harvest? I was like, no, no, actually it doesn't really like Tanzania. I got the wrong kind of corn. You know, you have to plant what's going to grow in your area. David said something about you planted pineapples. I had pineapples in Tanzania. Well, I can't have pineapples here. It's just not warm enough here. That's something to think about when you think about planting. What grows here? Ask anybody who's had a garden here. They'll tell you what does well and what doesn't. I really remember what doesn't grow well. And I really remember what does grow well. Also, the sun is really cool because it warms the soil. Actually, new seedlings, when they're first wanting to sprout, they don't actually need sunlight. You can do this in a dark space, but they have to have warmth. And the sun is what creates that warmth. Lots of seeds won't even germinate unless the soil is a certain temperature. Beans and corn is just like that. It needs to be a certain temperature. The sun is what brings that warmth. So just as the sun warms the soil for plant life, it also speeds the activity of different things that are going on in the soil, the different microbes and bacteria and all kinds of things, activity that's going on there. The sun helps with those processes. You probably know this. There's a lot of life and activity in the summer, right? A lot of that is because of the sun. One thing that's cool about the sun too is you can also use in your garden a process called solarization. And we'll be going over this later when we do diseases and we do weeds and things like that. But you can use the sun to kill soil-borne diseases. I will say this, often you will not need to do that if you follow a very well-rounded gardening philosophy. As I've been changing how I do things to try to work more with God's design, I'm not having problems with soil diseases. I'm not having problems with plant nutritional diseases either. The next one, T. Anybody know what this one is? I know you do. I know you went to Wildwood. Temperance. I put the definition here because it's an old term that we don't use very often. It's moderation in the things that are good and total abstinence from the things that are foul. I think this is very important when we think about gardening. What we want to put on our plants and what we put in our soil is very important because it will later be what goes into the watershed and what enters our bodies. So I believe in a total abstinence of things that are foul. And I believe also using good things within moderation. You can have good things to add, but too much can still be damaging. I can have great manure to add, but I can add too much and burn my plants. Or I can add too much of one good thing and then get the mineral balance and the nutritional balance out of whack. We see that God wants us to be temperate. We see that this is also one of the fruits of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Temperance is something that can be a big struggle for us sometimes. I tend to be an overworker. So as you saw that first picture, you saw that really big garden. I did it by myself. I also had babies that I would carry on my chest and put other babies to bed and carry a baby outside and weed and cry out there because I had all this work I had to do in this baby. And I realized it was intemperance. It would have been a lot healthy for me physically and emotionally to have had a smaller garden than feeling like I had to do all that. And so I want to tell you that for you beginner gardeners, start small and start with what you can handle because you don't need to have guilt and you don't need to feel like it's something that you can't succeed at or it's going to be very difficult. I'd rather you have a very good, positive first experience and then grow as your time and ability grows because you want it to be successful. And I have struggled with temperance in my personal life, but so has farming in general. We see a lot of intemperance now with how things are being gardened. Like we see these monoculture systems where year after year after year, the same plants are being put in the same places over and over again. So they need more chemicals and things to be able to grow into fruit. And in the end, it really robs and destroys the soil. We're actually creating what's called soil deserts throughout our country, which is places where the soil is actually dead. And when you harm soil to that extent, it takes so much to bring the life back. And isn't that true with us? We can kill ourselves through intemperance. And it takes so much to bring us back to life. I think this is more healthy, and this is probably what something maybe that you're looking for in your gardens would be a variety of different plants growing in harmony together. Plants like to be grown around other plants. We're going to be talking about companion planting and later on, and probably other plants that don't really like to be grown around each other. But this is our harmonious system. And what I can learn about this is maybe one year this plant will do well, and the other year, and the same year, this plant won't do well. And that it helps me understand more of what's happening in the life and activity of my garden. We also do crop rotation. This is something that I'm planting different plants of different families in different spaces. And it's actually really not that hard to figure out. It sounds huge, but it's not. But it's a good way to make sure you're not planting tomatoes in the same place over and over again, because it's not the best for your soil, because each plant takes and gives different things. It's very interesting. Plants take, but their roots also give in the soil. It's very, very interesting. Okay. A. What's A? Air. Do we need air? As we're all masked, I think we think about that more often. You're like, oh, I need air, right? We all need air. Let's all take a deep breath, okay? That feels good, doesn't it? We all need oxygen, right? It gets our brains going. We need air to breathe. Fresh air. Isn't that the beautiful thing about moving out to the country? Is we have more fresh air. I often wonder when I go around Boone, people are like jogging on the road. I'm like, don't you know about Greenway? Or don't you know, like, why do you want to be jogging around the road? The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. Scripture is full of references to breath, but I'm not going to go into those, but I love to know that God breathed life into man, and that his word is God breathed. It's just incredible. Well, we all know plants need air, right? But actually in your soil, there's a huge part of air in there, right? There needs to be air in the soil. What happens when we tend to take huge machinery or maybe walk on the same path over and over again? What happens to the soil and the plants in that space? It compacts, right? Which means it pushes those air spaces in those places where your worms and other things can go through it, makes it hard, right? So then the soil can't breathe as well. What happens when we cover soil maybe with a heavy plastic for long periods of time? The soil can't breathe, actually needs to breathe, which is very, very interesting. Most people don't know that. Another thing to think about with air, with gardening is, does your garden site have healthy airflow? If maybe you have hills on the side and then it maybe comes into a low space like here where the air doesn't flow very well, you might find your tomato plants get more disease than maybe your neighbors who's maybe planting on a slight incline. Plants need airflow to be healthy. If there's no air, there's no life. Okay, R. We better get this one right. We were supposed to be doing this today. Did we? Let me flip through that. Did we get our rest today? R's for rest. There remaineth therefore rest to the people of God, for he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works as God did from his. I want to encourage you all to enter into the rest of the Lord. That's not just a rest from physical and mental labor, but it's a rest from trying to save yourselves and resting in his salvation. He's done that work for you so you can rest. We've enjoyed a Sabbath rest, right? We have a 7-day-a-week rest that we enjoy, giving our bodies time to rest, where we can fellowship and focus on spiritual things and move away from our work like the garden or whatever it is, right? And just enjoy and relish in life. Because sometimes we can be so busy working. This can happen in the garden too. I walk into my garden and see, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. But often I don't just sit and just rest in that space. And it can be very, very important to just rest and enjoy. They've done study after study that for human beings, just to be in a green space and sitting quietly in a green space is so good for anxiety and depression. It heals the mind. And especially in a day and age when we're so busy with lots of things going in constantly, it's very important for us to make these spaces of rest. And I'm so glad God already thought about that. We just have to obey it, right? Well, the soil, the garden also needs rest. One thing I love about gardening here is we get a winter rest. In Tanzania, I garden all year long. But I had to make sure that I rested certain beds. It's important that we also give our garden a rest. It's very interesting. Leviticus talks about a Sabbath rest. It's actually commanded for the land every 7 years. What's neat about giving the land rest is it allows it to reach a balance, equilibrium by itself in a lot of ways. When I think about it, like the earth brings forth fruit with or without me, right? When I garden, I'm just trying to determine what fruit I want, right? It's going to bring, okay, let's say you clear a piece of land. What's going to happen to it in a year? Be totally grown up again, right? Like the land doesn't need me to produce. It just, if I want to have something particular, then I'm going to have to do the work to get it out of the land, right? But the land also needs to have this rest. One of the ways I do this is easy with my raised beds. I just pick a raised bed every year that I let sit. Very simple. So that I'm always able to produce. I don't have to go without food. But I know that there's sections that I rest. And one of the things we'll be talking about with garden design is it's really good to write things down. I've actually only started keeping a journal for my garden 2 years ago because I couldn't mentally remember what I had planted where and how much I had put here, and I was losing track. I used to be able to keep that all in my head, but I can't. But that also helps me make sure that I'm taking a time for rest with my land. And I'll be honest with you, if God said it, I'm going to do it because he's the one who created it. I don't know better than him. I cannot do it better than him, but I can obey what he says. And if he promises me that, then I know he's also going to promise me some kind of harvest, right? The last thing, and it's actually the most important thing, and you may not think of this very often with the garden, is trusting in God. There can't be real healing and health with us unless we trust in God. But I also believe that our harvest in the garden and our work in the garden and what God really wants to do in our hearts as we work in the garden is based on our trust in God. I pray over my garden. I walk through my garden and I pray over it. When I plant new things, I pray over it. When I don't know what's happening and I'm not exactly sure what to do about a certain situation, I pray over it. You really can't pray too much. And it may seem kind of strange, but I even pray out loud in my garden because I figure my plants might do well from hearing my voice. Who knows? But I believe that God knows when we're putting time and energy into something, and when we give it to him, and when we want to utilize it for his work, let's say giving away free produce for people who need it, is a great way to tithe out of your garden, then I know that he's going to bless my efforts. And he's the main gardener, right? I'm just a helper. Okay. I love this verse. Blessed is the man that trusted in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is, for he shall be as a tree planted by the waters, and that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh, but her leaves shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit. So I pray as you yield your heart to the Lord, and as you develop trust in him, that you'll also yield fruit. And I believe that as you move into learning how to garden and follow God's design, that he will also help it bring fruit. And I had to put this last picture in here because I thought it was really cool. It's a neat picture that goes into all the different things related to gardening. You have your root exudates, you have your microbial interactions, the nature and type of soil, your culture practices, all of these affect all of these different things, which all affect how your garden works. It's a beautiful web of life. And so I just want to encourage you that as you start planning an idea for gardening, as you begin hopefully caring for a garden in the next couple months, that you'll remember these 8 laws of health, and that you incorporate these into your garden as you work in your garden, as you think about your garden. And also, you not just remember the 8 laws of health for your garden, but also remember them for yourself, because an unhealthy gardener can't do the work out there, right? So that's really about it. That's all I wanted to share. We're going to get into a lot of more nitty gritty kind of things, not tomorrow, Sunday, but the next Sunday, and we'll kind of get into the how. But I just want to give you a little bit of an understanding of how I feel like God works with the garden in our hearts. Thank you. Boys, what do I do with this? Oh, you got it. You need help setting anything up?
The guys will help.
Okay.
Just put it up in here and put that stuff on the table. You tell me how to do this. You're a brave man, Michael Lee.
There we go. Is that it?
That's it. Great.
So just click on the next one.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, I don't know. You just throw it all out here. Yeah. Well, after listening to Nanette and knowing that Elizabeth is going to follow me, I feel like I'm a thorn between 2 roses. Yeah. But I can assure you that God's grace is sufficient, like he said to the Apostle Paul, who prayed that the thorn be taken away. In 15, 20 minutes, you might be willing to pray the same. But God didn't take it away because he knew it would be good for you. Thank you very much. How much is in there? It's like college kids in a phone booth or something.
I'm gonna give you this since you're using it a little bit.
Probably. As you already know, my portion is seeds and weeds and our deeds. I don't know how far we'll get today. I can't tell the time, so somebody, David, you're gonna have to give me a signal when I'm the last 5 minutes or something, okay? Oh yeah, thanks. Such a habit, isn't it? Well, my hope is that you'll learn something of value and that you'll gain an increased appreciation for the wonders of God's creation and be motivated to better cooperate with the laws that Nanette shared with us. Now, can you think of some biblical phrases that involves seeds and weeds? Just speak up. You reap what you sow. Good. Okay, the wheat and the tares. Who did this? Our enemy. All right. Oh, yeah, he that sows sparingly shall reap sparingly and abundantly the same, right? There's more. The mustard seed, yeah. Right, the sower went forth to sow and some fell, right? Good. Except a seed die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And consider the lilies and how they grow. Could I have my computer? Where did I put that? Why am I checking my pockets? I guess that's a habit. I'm always checking my pockets. I think I should have one pocket in a pair of pants. I don't know, maybe like a purse, you know, it's in there somewhere. But how does a plant take water, raise it up against the force of gravity, combine it with air, and make sugar? And how does it then use the sugar to power the biochemical reactions to form molecules of protein and polysaccharides and lipids and plant tissue? How does it do this? How does it store food in the form of sucrose, a combination of glucose and fructose and starch? And how does it take inorganic minerals and make them into organic minerals so you and I can eat it and find it useful and not harmful when we take that plant into our bellies? How does a lily or any plant grow from the seed? This is my first attempt. Miracles never cease. A quote I like is, for Israel in the promised land, every family, read in the Bible, had a home on the land with sufficient ground for tilling. Thus were provided both the means and the incentive for a useful, industrious, and self-supporting life. And no devising of man has ever improved upon that plan. To the world's departure from it, it is owing to a large degree the poverty and wretchedness that exists today. Well, I decided I would go around, not this year, but previously I went around and took pictures of gardens in my area, and they were getting ready, and I've seen several getting plowed, but not everybody was getting their ground ready. There's another garden space, and then that was another one, and this one I thought was pretty good, and this one was maybe even a little better. And then I came home and took a picture of mine and my onion patch and the cabbage and the sweet potato row getting ready for sweet potatoes. Now that's at 4,000 foot elevation. Sweet potato is a tropical plant, right? Yeah. And the neighbors had a hard time believing that. And the herb beds for my wife, and the garlic bed, and the lettuce bed, and then another lettuce bed, and another onion bed, and the raised beds that the net was talking about. And David's lovely picture you had there. I touched two things. Okay. The next one is a photo of our carrots. I got a new neighbor, and he doesn't know diddly squat about things, in my opinion, about how to live in the country, but he's learning. And he wanted me to see his gardens. I tilled it for him, and he grew, thank you. He grew a plot to save the seed, for which we will get to next Sunday, perhaps. And I said, how long do you plan to grow those carrots to get seed and those red beets? And he was just going to harvest them this year. It's the next year. It's got to wait the second year growth to get seeds from carrots. So this is my carrot seed bed there. I'm saving seed off of it. The net leaned this way, and I hope that you always remember that you're not working alone. And when you're tempted to become discouraged, remember that the angels of God. Can you imagine that? All around you. They will minister to the very earth, causing it to bring forth its treasure. By the laws of God in nature, effect follows cause with unvarying certainty. How then important is it that we learn these laws and implement them? This one's too powerful. We just touch the ones that are underlined. The special needs of every variety of plant must be studied. So you're planting a tomato or a pepper or a squash or an onion, or they're all going to be different. And we must learn them like we study people. The attention required in transplanting that not even a root fiber should be crowded or misplaced. And then drop down to the bottom. In our hearts, tenderness is called forth to minister to the beautiful objects of God's creation. Angels are ministering to the earth. You and I are ministering to the plants. Now we move to the seed. There is life in the seed. There is power in the soil. But unless infinite power is exercised day and night, the seed will yield no return. I don't care what we do, how much we know. We cannot make it grow. We do nothing but rearrange things. The showers of rain must refresh the thirsty field. The sun must impart warmth. Electricity must be conveyed to the buried seed. The life which the Creator has implanted, He alone can call forth. Every seed grows, every plant develops by the power of God. It's a mystery and it's a miracle. It's amazing. But notice its electricity must be conveyed to the buried seed. Does a seed need ground to grow? No. It only needs electricity. It only needs that vitality. It can get it from the ground, but I've seen plants grow in the air. No ground. I've seen them root in water. So it's the electrical current that's needed. And you and I, by cooperating with the laws of God, are getting into that mystery of how it grows. Now, if we're going to talk about seeds, naturally, some of you may, probably most of you know, but in case anybody doesn't know, you get a seed catalog, and they're going to try to get you to purchase this seed and that seed by Keller Pictures, and you wonder who grew those things. You know, my favorite catalog is black and white, but occasionally I look on the computer where it's in color because I just want to see what it's going to look like, but I don't want to be enticed by the color photography. But there's a few terms that you're going to need to know if you're going to purchase seed. The first is, what is open pollinated seed? It's the result of natural or human selection with others of the same species. And so when you plant the seed, it's going to be true to that seed. So you can save that seed from that plant. That net pumpkin there, is this Echimedias? Or the nets? Okay. Okay. Don't blame me. Yeah, someone asked me this week, how long do you keep your neck pumpkins and they stay good? About 14 months is the limit for the most of them. But if they're grown well, they'll have what they need to store well. But that's open pollinated. That seed goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it stays true to seed because it's open pollinated. Now, second true to seed thing is called an heirloom seed. You'll see in your catalog to say, oh, an heirloom seed. Oh, that's really, it makes you feel like that's better or something. And it may be. But it has to be 40 to 50 years old to be an heirloom seed. And often it comes from the old country. You know, your great grandparents brought it or something like that. Because in that part of southern Italy, they grew this really great hot pepper. And they've kept it going. That's an heirloom seed. But you also see hybrid seeds. And if it says F1 hybrid, it means that it's the first filial generation made by crossing two different plant varieties, parent varieties, not plant varieties, parent varieties, like two different kinds of sweet corn. And maybe like a cockapoo. Like two different dogs, Cocker Spaniel and a poodle or something like that. Is that what it means? Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. And so you get this unique dog. And if you breed enough of these same cockapoos together, after so many generations, the genetics will stabilize sufficiently and you can breed two cockapoos and get a cockapoo. But at the beginning, you may get one that looks like a Cocker Spaniel and another looks like a poodle, but it was two cockapoos, but they haven't established that settlement of the genetics, okay? Now, and a hybrid is not necessarily bad at all, so don't think it is, because you may want to get a variety of hybrid seed in order to have a disease-tolerant tomato. Or you might want sweet corn that's white and yellow kernels on the same cob. You know, there's different reasons you'd have a hybrid. So a hybrid isn't bad, but you can make them yourself, you know. Take a male flower from acorn squash, rub it with a female flower from a zucchini, and save the seed. And next year you can plant it. You may get just what you're wanting, but you also may get something like ugly and inedible, misshapen. And it's just fun to play, but it's not necessarily bad. Okay, and it happens when things cross-pollinate in your garden. And perhaps if you're saving seed, you don't want this to happen, but it tends to happen anyhow. And some plants actually need to cross-pollinate in order to maintain their viability. The one exception to it, no, I say that, do I say it?
Yeah.
Did I say it here? Okay, where do I say it? Oh, okay, yeah. If it cross-pollinates this year, it'll only affect the fruit of the next generation. So if you have 2 cucumbers or 2 corn, you can save that seed, and you don't know what you're going to get. But you can cross-pollinate corn this year and get yellow and white on the same cob. Did that come out right? Does anybody, can you speak to?
When you save the seed from that corn the next year, then you're not always sure what you're going to get.
Right.
next year.
But this year you can plant a yellow corn over here and a white corn over there, and you get corn that's yellow and white on the same cob. Okay, so you hybridize in that year and it's turned out pretty good. That's okay. All right, let's go on here. So we're going to start the seed. You want to use sterile soil, generally potting mix, because if you don't use sterile soil, there can be diseases that will cause something we tend to, this most common is called damping off, which kind of makes your plant kind of wilt and die, and you don't know what you did. So we used to take our garden soil and put it in the wood stove oven and cook it and sterilize it. And it worked really good, but it smelled awful bad. It took a while to air out the house. So now that we're prosperous enough to buy sterile potting soil, that's what we do nowadays. So you want to start with sterile soil when you plant a seed if you're going to start it indoors. Outdoors, you just plant it. But you can have the same problem, but not nearly as bad because the soil's been solarized by the sun by the time it's warm enough to plant them anyhow. So you need 6 or 8 hours of rest. Once you plant the seed, I'm sorry, I'm a bit scattered. You plant the seed, these peppers, and they grew. It's absolutely wonderful what happened. And you got them under a light or in the sunny window or whatever. Some people keep a light on them for a long time, but plants need to rest as well as we do. So when you go to bed, turn out the light. Let the thing rest for the night. Don't artificially make the thing grow by pouring on fertilizer and putting 16 hours of daylight on the poor little thing. All right, give it a chance. All right, the damping off I've covered briefly. We'll deal with that, how to deal with if you start plants in the house and they get a problem, damping off or anything else, Sunday coming, that would be a good question and answer time. What do you do to treat them so you don't have weeks of time, energy, and money invested in something that's going to die on you, okay? Now, so we're going to take this plant and we're going to transplant it. Now, if I grab this little pepper plant and pulled on it, I tear the roots out of that soil. So I never want to do that. Tear the roots, because that's where it's getting its feed. So you push on the bottom like this, and you let it fall over like that, and now this beautiful little plant is in your hand. Now, a lot of people will grab a pepper plant, a tomato plant, or any kind of transplant by the neck. Now, a plant can grow a new leaf, but it can't grow a new stem. So don't grab it by the neck. Grab it by the leaves, or the leaf and the neck, or something like that, and gently place it in a prepared pot that's bigger. You know, it's already got the dirt in there, and gently set it in there, okay? Put a little more sterile soil around it, and then water it. Because you go to the greenhouse, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of plants, but they planted the little seeds in a tray, and then they took a little spoon, and they dug them out and transplanted them. And then they may have to transplant them again into a larger pot that was here earlier today. Thank you. They may have to move it here. If you have large plants that you plan to transplant, you want to have large containers. Transplant them only one time, perhaps. But you can't start them out in your house that, you know, one seed in one big container. You just don't have the room for it in your house. So you start them out in a big tray, move them one time necessary, depending on the time for when you can move them to the field. But don't mess with the roots or the neck of the plant. It can grow new leaves, but it can't grow a new stem. So be careful about the stem. And sometimes when you transplant, you have here in this plant, these two leaves that are not really true leaves. They're cotyledons, which is the two halves of the seed that you planted, germinated. It really doesn't need those cotyledons. And a pepper plant, like a tomato plant or an eggplant plant, grows roots on a considerable amount of its stem that's buried. So when you plant this, and plant it deep. Now, if you do that to some other plants, like a tree, if you have an 80-year-old oak tree, it's 90 feet tall, and you put dirt up the first 2-3 feet of the trunk because you're regrading the yard, that tree will die within a year. Because the first 3 feet of a tree trunk is where the tree breathes as much as the leaves. So you don't cover it up. Every variety, you study every variety. So you plant it deep and gentle. And then when you come back, instead of having roots just at the very, very bottom, now you have roots up the stem. So it'll withstand a transplant to something like your garden much more easily. But so you plant in a container, or a waterproof container, or something like that. You plant all your little lettuce plants in here, because lettuce will transplant easily. Elijah, do we have a handout about transplanting the orange? Yeah, would you take maybe one per family? There should be two different ones. They're both orange, page 1 and 2. If you just, when he comes by, grab one of these or start it around, something like that. When you put your 1,000 lettuce seeds in a tray, and 853 of them germinated. Now you got lots of them. Lettuce is an easy transplanter. There's 2 pages. Both are orange. You dig them out with a spoon and you transplant them. Lettuce transplant's real easy. Not much to it. Why am I telling you this? I forgot. Oh, yeah. Suppose you started your red beets in a tray like this. Or, no, let's see, we plant them directly in the garden. Let's do that. We plant our red beets out in the garden. And we plant them neatly in a row because they're easy to harvest that way. And you're very careful to space out your red beet seeds, one here and one 3 inches away, and another one 3-4 inches away, another one 3-4 inches away. And you come back and you say, well, I've got 4 red beets growing there, and 5 red beets growing here, and 3 red beets growing there. I only planted 1 seed. What happened? Seeds are in clusters. The fruit of a red beet, the seeds is the fruit, and they're compound. So you have like a little rosette here, and one here, there, and one here, and one here, and the backside the same. And sure enough, you have 5 seeds, or 6 seeds, or 8 seeds, or 2 seeds on a red beet seed. And how are you going to thin them out? Because you got these little roots, little roots, little roots, little roots. Here's the soil. And now you got these nice little things that are growing here. And obviously, when that red beet gets to be this big, because unlike carrots, it is not self-thinning, how in the world is you going to manage that space? And if I pull this one up, what happens to that one? Or I pull this one up, what happens to the roots here? I tear them as well. And I never want to do that. So I knew I should have done this myself. I don't know where I put, there they are. I take these scissors and go snip, snip, snip. And I never destroy or disturb or damage the roots of the plants beside it. It's a very handy tool to thin things in your garden. Let's see, we're going to write right on here. Okay, let's get serious. When I take a seed, these are Roma bean seeds. If you save seed or store seed, it is really a good idea to write on that container, because the worst notes are better than the best memory, aren't they? What it is that's in there, because some seeds tend to look a lot like other seeds. And if that's something you like, and you should plant what you like to eat, not something you don't like to eat, because you won't get around to eating it as much. So I plant a seed. Is blue an acceptable color, or should I use green, brown? Okay. I take the seed. This is a corn seed. Now, sometimes you find corn seed to be pink or something like that. What is it? Nanette, what is it?
I'm not sure. I always thought it was something against disease. I don't find that with organic seed, but I find it like if you go to a local seed place and just need some seed. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fungicide, and it's a crow choker. For whatever. A crow won't eat treated corn, much of it. They might take a few and check to make sure that every one of them is treated, but crow is smart enough to know where you put that seed. If you damage the ground at all, it knows to go from here to there to there. It's not looking for them between where you plant it. It knows where you disturb the soil. So you take a corn seed and you put it in the ground. Or do I put it in the ground this way? Why not? Yeah. Okay. Okay, here's the root comes out. What is it going to come out on this piece of corn? Yeah, it's going to come out here. And which way is it going to go from there? Well, how much time is it going to take? And energy. Because now it's not getting the energy from the sun or from the rain or from wherever else. It's getting it from the kernel of corn. So its first burst of growth is getting it from that little piece of corn that you put in the ground. And then once it gets true leaves up here, it's going to do pretty good on its own. The first two are the cotyledons that take this half of corn and see it from the side view. I don't know if I can draw it. It's just as good as the other view, isn't it? And it has 2 halves in it. The germ comes out. These 2 halves split. And become the first, join down here as the root, become the first leaves as this is shot out. So it's getting its nourishment from the seed. So what you want to do, we had an eraser here at one time. It is. What you want to do is plant a seed the way it grows. If it's big enough to handle, place it in the ground the way it grows. What did you do? You made it a lot easier on the plant, so you get a better start, and you shortened your days to maturity. And in cold weather climates, or this like around here, and those pictures of gardens that I showed you at the very beginning are ranging 1,000 to 1,500 feet lower elevation than our garden. So I'm always thinking, how can I get this plant to maturity before the frost comes? Because our window is June 15 to September 15. And that's our safe window for frost. So that's not a lot of time. So plant the seed the way it would naturally grow in the way it wants to grow, okay? All right, now if you've got a bunch of seed, you don't know the germination of that seed. Am I on that slide? Yeah. Okay, most seeds will sprout within 5 days. Exceptions are like okra. And okra's got a hard shell, really hard shell. So score it with a fingernail file and it'll germinate faster for you. Here they are. A way to germinate seeds is to take them and put them in a fold of damp paper towels, lay them in a sunny window in a waterproof container. Keep that paper towel moist. They're folded inside of this paper towel, however you like to do it, and wait a couple of days and see if they germinate, because you don't want to take out to your garden, put in the soil, a bunch of seeds that won't grow. And you just lost 2 weeks of time waiting and hoping. Maybe it's going to be right, and it's not right. Because you don't have 2 extra weeks in your growing season. So you can pre-germinate your seeds. And if they're small, really small, and be hard to find out, because when you put seeds in dirt and they're small, you can't even tell they're there sometimes. The carrot seeds, you can't see them. But you can see them if you put them on a white background. So you roll this out in your house and you put the seeds in the way spacing that you want to, double it over, damp it a little bit, just a little bit, with maybe a spray bottle like this, squirt it, and let it dry. And now you can take this out and lay it in the dirt. Voila, just the spacing you want, okay? Now our gardens are about 6 times the size of this room, perhaps. And if I spend 2 hours a week, I'll have extra time maintaining those gardens. The biggest time consumer is planting and harvesting. I do not try to garden so I can spend money or weed. So I spent years trying to figure out how to do it without. And that'll speed up the planting. And how deep do you plant a seed? Different depths. 2 to 3 times the seed's greatest diameter. You plant it too low, it won't be warm enough or wet enough or something else, and it will rot in the soil. You plant too shallow, it'll dry out, and it won't germinate. So 2 to 3 times is a rule of thumb, the greatest diameter of that seed in the depth of the soil. And when you cover it up, lightly tap the ground that you cover it with of light soil so it doesn't get really hard and has to try to push up through something like concrete, you know? And see. And if you want to soak seed like corn, you want it to come up faster, you take and get a little container of water, throw all your corn seed in there, lukewarm water, let it soak a while and swell up for about an hour. Drain the water off, go plant the corn, and it'll come up, depending on the weather, a week or 2 sooner. All right. Now, how to organize your garden. A practical way is to think in terms of 10-foot increments. 10, 20, 30-foot rows, etc. Or square foot, like a garden bed, 5 by 10 or something like that, 2.5 by 12. Why? Because if you ever send in that soil sample that Nanette suggested, they're going to come back and give you recommendations based on a 10-foot increment, like 1,000 square feet or something. And you can do the math and figure out how many pounds of whatever you're supposed to add, because your garden is that way already. Because if you garden in raised beds that are 11 square feet or 14 square feet, and your rows are, what, 12-foot rows or whatever, it's a little bit more difficult if you ever want to amend your soil. Am I going too fast? Okay. How much are you going to plant? Well, probably more than you think you need in case you have a bad year. If you have a good year, give it away. Because the average American eats about 2,000 pounds of food a year, and a decent garden produces about a pound of produce per square foot. So how well do you want to eat from your garden? Easy to figure. And how do you space it out? Well, in nature, nothing grows in rows. I was out picking berries one day and something caught my eye. It was plants in a row on our property. And I know I didn't plant them there. And I knew they didn't grow there naturally. The neighbor decided to plant some marijuana on our land. And it caught my eye because it was in the woods, but in a row. A little bit snow, a little sunny, yeah. Stagger your plants, at least stagger your plants. The guy had no brains. All right, and that's the point. Plants, if you plant them in clusters, like you saw the lettuce bed, plants give off an aroma, an odor that communicates with other plants of like species. And one plant gets a bug, land on it, and it goes, whew, that doesn't feel good. And it sends out that message to all the other plants in the neighborhood. And they all put out an odor to get rid of that insect. And so you have less problems of infestation if you plant your plants in clusters. But suppose you don't have a lot of space. This is only a 20-foot square or whatever it is. Then you're planting here. Now, if you plant here, you're going to crowd yourself. So you don't want to do that. You want to plant here and there and there, and you get a lot more in your space. And suppose here you're planting corn. This is your corn, and it's going to get big and shady. Then you plant pumpkins that can roll around anywhere they want to in your corn patch, and it helps keep the coons out anyhow. They don't like that. Or you just go ahead and plant lots and lots of lettuce, because corn is going to take a long time to grow. And in the meantime, the lettuce is going to grow fast. And it's going to have lots of sunshine until your corn gets big. So you plant things together. It may be also that you want something to be shaded, and corn is a good shader sometime. But that's another reason you plant a certain way is I have north and south there. Okay, the corn starts growing roots. Do you know which way the primary roots will grow in corn? Or peppers or tomatoes? All right, I'll give you this is, I don't know how to illustrate that way. I'll do it differently. You're probably going to hoe your corn. Corn is one of those things you tend to hoe. When you dig down with your hoe, you're going to cut roots if they're there. And the roots will primarily grow in the north-south direction. Okay? So the east and west is a free field primarily. So you plant your rows north-south direction if if your garden slope, things like that, placement allows for it, so that when you hoe, you're not damaging the roots. To illustrate it, I just went out the other day and dug up a tree. Actually, I dug up about a dozen or more of these trees, this birch tree. And I could tell that the reason the way I did it was knowing the variety of plant it was and how it grows. Remember from the beginning, study each variety of plants. This particular plant almost never sends a root in a southern direction. Almost always only in a north direction. And all your plants, nearly, if they have a tap root or main cluster roots, will send them in the north direction. So if you transplant a plant like a tree in an orchard that you have, and you know where the primary roots are growing in a north direction, don't plant them this way, because what are they going to do? They're going to turn around. That takes a lot of energy and time, and it may strangle the tree, because the roots are going to turn around and they'll grow in each other and create just one big mess, and you don't know why your tree's not thriving. And you could take lady slippers from the woods and plant them, transplant them, which is unheard of nearly, if you're really, really careful to plant them in the same orientation they grew in the wild. This is the, can you see? Okay, they're all growing north. And the feeder roots are these little tiny things, actually the ones you can't see, is where it gets all its nutrients. It doesn't get its nutrients from the big roots. It gets its nutrients from the hair or smaller size roots. So you have a name for that? Feeder roots, okay? And they're going to be the farthest out. They're going to be in line generally with the outside of the plant, which is when Nanette says, feed the soil, don't feed the plant. The soil is out there. People are feeding the bottom of the plants, and that's not where the feeder roots are anyhow, generally. So, and you can stop me anytime if they don't, especially if they're not making any sense. All right, how long will seed last? We got a handout for that. People ask that all the time. Well, I'm going to save my corn, and I'm going to buy enough for 5 years just in case no corn is available. Yeah, go for it if you want, but you ought to plant your corn every year because it doesn't last much longer than a year most of the time. So by variety, I have a handout that shows you how long most, in general, your seed will last if you cared for it. And how do you care for seed? How do you store your seed? Okay, it depends on the light, moisture, and temperature of storage, as well as the life quality of the seed. So seeds are alive, don't vacuum seal them. I made that mistake one time. Put them in a jar, bottle, or plastic bag and store them in a cool, dry environment, preferably with temperature and humidity are consistent. And where is that mostly? Say again? Cellar? Yeah. Refrigerator, freezer. If it's a frost-free kind that gets hot and then cold again and hot and then cold again, it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's better than most things. I store mine in these kind of little organizing trays you get at building supply store. Keeps them pretty neat. You can take the whole container and stick it in the refrigerator, stick it in your freezer. It's a very easy way, and it keeps all your seeds organized, and you can refer to it yearly and say, okay, there's my butternut squash. I got enough of them. Yeah, I got enough cucumbers. Here's my herbs. See what herbs I have. You see, you can easily go through it, and you know, if someone says, I think we should have cabbage. Well, do we have cabbage seeds? Oh yeah, we got cabbage. Look at all the varieties of cabbage we have. And it really helps you keep your things organized. And believe me, there's years worth of good food in that little container of seeds that you can easily store somewhere. All right. Now, if you're going to keep it in the refrigerator, freezer, that's a good idea, but make sure your temperature and humidity is, if you added it together, is less than 100. So if your temperature is 32, you can have 70, almost 70% humidity. But if your temperature is 50 in your root cellar, then your humidity needs to be less. The moisture content of your seed needs to be less. Okay. Go down here to however. Okay. Basically, you can do a test to find out the humidity of your seed, the moisture of your seed. If you fold the seed and it breaks rather than bends, it's getting pretty dry. If it shatters, like corn and beans, if you take and hit them with a hammer and it shatters, it's good and dry. If you don't store them in a cold place, if you store them in a 5-gallon bucket, for example, throw in a few bay leaves or diatomaceous earth, because when bugs, larvae hatch out, that takes care of them and they won't destroy your seeds. Okay. I'm gonna go here real quickly. How much time do we have? You don't know? Doesn't matter? Okay. Take the handout, if you would, on onions. You go into some hardware store or convenience store and they'll try to sell you sets of onions. The reason I picked this is because this is the time of year people are starting to plant onions. And if you learn what's on the sheet, it'll save you a lot of headaches about onions. You can get the sets or you get onion plants. These can almost dry out and they'll still be viable to start again if you get them into the soil. If you're concerned about it, you can wrap them in wet newspaper and it really works good. But there's a reason you get a certain type of onion, and sometimes you're wasting your time if you get a kind that isn't good for your area. And people say, well, I'm going to grow potatoes. Well, if you're going to grow sweet potatoes, you can start them yourself, because you don't start sweet potatoes from seed. You start them from plants called slips. So you go to a natural food store and buy a good quality sweet potato, organically grown, that you like. Cut it in half, stick it in some nice sterile soil and cover it up and keep it moist. Or you take the fat end of the sweet potato and put some toothpicks or nails or something in it like that, and make sure like the bottom third stays in water. And that'll stimulate the sprouting, both these methods. And then you once the sprouting occurs and it grows little plants on there, then those little plants start growing roots outside of the potato. And once they have a sufficient group of roots, just break them off the mother plant, stick them in the soil, keep them moist.
When do you have to do that?
About 6 to 8 weeks at minimum before you plant them. And the sweet potato, you wait till the ground is really warm.
But to start the potato in the jar, when would I start that then?
6 to 8 weeks.
Before I want to plant?
Yeah.
Do they need sunlight when they're growing out of the sweet potato, like a regular plant? Like
Yes.
sunny windowsill?
They'll come out with the leaves, and then they'll come out with the plants will grow, and they're using the mother potato for its nourishment. The same with your other potatoes. Irish potatoes, white potatoes, whatever you call. I don't know what you call the ones of different colors, but it'll be soon time to plant potatoes. You don't generally start your potatoes from seed. You start it from seed potatoes. If it's about this size, plant the whole potato. If it's about this size, you probably can take your knife and cut it in half and let the wound dry out in sunlight before you put it in soil. So it's just like an open wound or a closed wound. It's scabbed off a little bit. You want them to be scabbed and dry so it doesn't pick up disease from the soil. And this one here started to sprout. It's the purple ones. They sprout quickly in the spring. You cut that in 1 or 2 and leave a sprout or the eye. You don't see where the sprouts, but you know where the eyes are. They become the sprouts on the potato. So potatoes plant will live off the potato itself until it has enough plant to get nourishment. White potato grows up on the plant. A sweet potato grows down. You see people make a nice hill and then throw a white potato in the top. No, you put this white potato, you dig a hole, put it down, cover it with a hill, and you cover it with more as the plant grows, keeps growing up, then you put more dirt on it, and make your hill that way. Red potatoes will grow big. This is not necessarily a big one, but it's just a good one, good size. I had a neighbor who was a potato farmer, had 400 acres, sometimes rented at least 200 acres. And I had said, Jim, you got to come over and see these red potatoes. They're so big. Yeah, they always grow big. What do you mean they grow big? He was from Florida where they got a long season. He said, Mark, women don't want big red potatoes. He said they want them about this big. So when they get that big, we go through the field, spray the plants and kill them so the potatoes don't get any bigger. And sometimes he'd take the load over to the chip factory because he was farming for potato chips. And the truck that went behind the harvester, the conveyor belt, picked up the potatoes, drove 5 miles to Frito-Lay potato chip factory, and they would reject the load because there's too many rotten potatoes in it. Well, no wonder. It's because how he grew them. And I said, oh, you got to tell me what's wrong with my potato plants. He said, I don't know anything about potatoes. All I know is commercial fertilizer. So I grow stuff yourself as much as you can. Let me catch up a couple things in my last minute and a half. If you plant something, label it. You'll learn it better. If you're going to plant in rows, get something that'll make a row nicely. And if it's a row, like you're going to have to hoe it rather than manually put it. If you manually put it, put something low to the ground. If it's high and you're going to have to hoe your row before you put the seeds in, then make it high so that your guide string isn't in the way of your hoe all the time. If you're really concerned about is it the right time to plant, get a soil thermometer and stick it in the soil and see what the temperature of your soil is in relation to what the plant likes. And if you have raised beds, come up with something like this, just a piece of wood cut a different way. Because when I make rows to plant seeds, I just go like this, usually twice. And then I plant the seeds in those rows and I go like that. So depending on what you're growing, how close you want your rows, that's a great little time saver. And this is important. If you do not want to transplant, you can plant in peat pots. And then especially your vine crops, you don't want to disturb the roots from a little seedling because that'll really slow them down. So you plant the vine crops in peat pots and they will transplant much easier for you. That's good enough, huh? Okay, thank you very much. You don't want to miss the one on weeds because weeds are your friends. They're not your enemies. Don't fight them. Befriend them and they'll do you a lot of good service. We'll learn that next Sunday. Is this in your way?
Mom, is this, can we set a clock up?
What's up?
Thanks.
Careful.
Just a little plug for sweet potatoes. If you see the ones down on the table there,
We start our plants every year. This past year, we took about a dozen small sweet potato plants and made about 180 slips and harvested over 260 pounds of sweet potatoes from our garden. Our family loves sweet potatoes. They're a great thing to have on hand, and you can keep them many, many months. These are from our harvest in October, so that's something we can get excited about. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about gardening as a family. And there are a few things that I want to touch on, but I'll try not to keep you here very long because I know you're getting hungry. I want to share a verse with you from the Bible. This is not specifically about families, but it's found in Isaiah 58:11. And the Lord shall guide thee continually and satisfy thy soul in drought and make fat thy bones. And thou shalt be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters fail not. God wants to see us flourish like a watered garden. There's nothing more refreshing than walking into a beautiful garden and seeing the things that God causes to grow there. One of the things that we have the privilege of learning in the garden is character development. And that's something that our entire family can benefit from, not just parents. You know, I know many of you in here are parents, but if you're not a parent, this can still apply to you. Well, there are plenty of opportunities in the garden for bad attitudes. As you know, there's things you have to deal with, like weeds and rocks and sticks and roots and all those kind of things. The hot sun, the rain that's coming that you're not ready for, etc., etc. We would all love to be able to think about gardening and just think about all the good produce that we get to eat from the garden, because that's the best part of gardening. But there are other things that we have to take into account as well. So one thing that we have discovered in gardening with children is if mom and dad have good attitudes and we're happy when we go out to the garden, we encourage our children to do that. If we go out and we say, oh, it's so hot out here. Oh, I hate weeding. Oh, I can't wait until we can go do something more fun. Guess what the kids are going to say? They're going to say the same thing, right? Because they echo what we say. Now, does that mean that if we go and say, oh, it's such a pretty day, let's go spend some time in the garden, that they're going to be jumping up and down? No, not necessarily. But if you accustom them to working in the garden, then you will see that the more you work with them, the better attitudes they can have. Anything worth having is worth working for, right? We can teach that to our children. If we teach the children that the carrots come from the ground, you know, you work the soil, you plant the seeds, you maintain the garden, and then you get to eat the carrot. They're going to appreciate it more than if you just go to Walmart and buy the carrots, right? They're going to know where the food comes from, and they will appreciate it more. It is also great to be able to teach the young people to work together. We're a team. You know, we can do races in the garden sometime to see who can get their bed weeded the fastest, but sometimes it's fun to work on the bed together and see how fast we can do it together. There are many different ways that you can bring things into the garden. God is with us in our work. He blesses us. He's the one who sends the rain. This is a variety of tomatoes that we grew and made a beautiful plate. And we like to be able to harvest the produce and set it on our table. I don't know if you can see that platter's on the middle of our picnic table there, but many different kinds of tomatoes. I want to share a few quotes with you. Let the mother take her children with her into the field or garden
and from the things of nature draw lessons that will point them to nature's God and aid them in the struggle against evil. Let her point them to the lofty trees, the shrubs, and the carpet of green that covers the earth. Let her teach them how the lily, striking its roots down deep through the mire into the sand below, gains nourishment that enables it to send up a pure, beautiful bloom. Then let her show them how by rejecting that which is impure and choosing that which is pure, they may grow up into pure, noble men and women. Now, we're not suggesting that you take your 2-year-old into the garden and make them weed for 3 hours. Okay? Nanette mentioned something about having a baby on her back, when her babies were little. Snugglies are wonderful, something you can have your little one with you. Also, when they get a little bit older, children love to just play in the dirt. And they also love learning. And so when children are young, 1, 2, 3, 4, they can be out in the garden near you. There's many, many things children can do to occupy their time, playing in the dirt, looking for the beautiful flowers. I don't know if you all can see what this is, but Elijah has like an empty squash shell and it's full of morning glory blossoms. And he was just so excited about that. And we encourage our children to look for the beauty in the garden. This is a squash bloom. There are many beautiful things that we can teach them to appreciate. Giving children a small piece of the land that they can plant their own garden in is something that's very exciting. And that's what Enoch and Elijah were doing in these pictures. They can get very excited about that. You can see here, they're happy about their corn harvest. As children grow, you can give them responsibilities based on their age and ability. And they really like feeling like their job is important. Even at a young age, they can start helping with big things sometimes. Here you see we're at a farmer's market. This was a very small farmer's market. Gardening is one of those things that if you give your children the gift of learning to garden, it can help them so many times throughout life. Actually, this particular time, we had ended up moving down to my parents' place temporarily because my father was very ill and my husband didn't have work there. So we tilled up the land and we planted some food and we went to farmers markets. And you can teach your children to grow food and they can do that almost anywhere and to be able to support themselves. Shortly after that, we had the privilege of working with some friends on a farm for just a few months. And so they got to experience some of the big equipment and such. You can see in the picture on the right here, our oldest son is helping to plant, I think it's sweet potatoes, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he enjoyed that. And in the picture on the left, Elijah's riding on the tractor with Daddy. And we had some fun experiences there. This trailer is full of Brussels sprouts, and Elijah's boots are full of mud. When we grew our family from 4 to 6, we had the privilege of living and working on a farm. So back in 2012, which was the year that we adopted our girls, they were 10 and 13 at the time, and our boys were 6 and 12. And so we found that a very good way to connect the family was in the garden. It was a very, very busy, hectic year. We were also running a baked goods business, but we had great opportunities to work together. We did pretty much everything together. And this was some of the produce that we grew, and it was just a great bonding time for all of us. We want to teach children the value of work. Does anybody know what I have in my hands there? What's that? No, it's not that nice, unfortunately. It's roots and sticks, mostly roots. It's one of those things that you deal with if you're clearing land and starting a new garden. It's been a wooded area or there's been big plants growing there. It's something we've dealt with a number of times in a garden. It's one of those things that isn't as pleasant as some of the other things we do, but it's a necessary thing. And this is one of those opportunities for character development. But we want to teach our children the value of physical work. We don't want to make them feel like they can't get their fingernails dirty. You know, we want them to feel like they've accomplished something at the end of the day and they rest better. And on the right, you'll see, well, you can see Daniel kind of off in the distance in our garden. And there's a bed of lettuce on the right, but right there where you see that hoe, those are some really obnoxious weeds that we let get kind of large. And that's what you don't want to happen in your garden, because once they get to that size, they're very, very difficult to get out. So we also teach the children when the weeds are this big. You know, Mark was saying if he spent 2 hours a week maintaining his garden, he would have extra time. If you get the weeds when they're small, they're so much easier to deal with. And we can teach the children that it's the same in our lives and in our characters. When Satan tries to get weeds growing in our hearts, if we will surrender those to Christ when they're very small and not allow them to grow and not feed them, but pull them up by the roots and throw them out of the garden, if we do that, then Satan can't get a foothold. We just continue asking Christ to come in and to cleanse us, to weed us. This was the farm where, well, thank you. This is the farm where we moved. It's a little complicated to keep up with us. We moved several times. So we had the privilege of caretaking a farm. This was after our experience working on a farm. We moved to a farm that we were caretaking and we spent the summer there. That's the summer when our girls moved in with us. And we did market gardening, lots of greens. This is our oldest son with a bin full of lettuce. This is our family at the farmer's market. It was a great experience. Some of the produce that we sold. The first quote on this page is from the book, The Great Controversy. This is talking about the Waldensian young people. While the youth were inured to toil and hardship, the culture of the intellect was not neglected. They were taught that that all their powers belonged to God, and that all were to be improved and developed for his service. We can teach our children that God is the one who gave them the physical strength that they have, and he expects us to use it for good things. And the second quote, how much the student of nature can learn of God if at the same time he will become a student of the word. If with the word of God in your heart you go forth to break up and cultivate the soil, you will find your hearts softened and subdued by the Holy Spirit of God. The mind will be opened to the teachings of God in the natural world. And that's from Youth's Instructor. And you can see there on the left, those are bins of pumpkins that we harvested. This is a picture of our family that year and some of the produce we have there. Working in the garden. One advantage of working in the garden, and I think Nanette talked a lot about the health that we receive from working in the garden. It builds our immune system. Getting our hands in the dirt is so healthy. If the land is cultivated, it will, with the blessing of God, supply our necessities. We are not to be discouraged about temporal things because of apparent failures, nor should we be disheartened by delay. We should work the soil cheerfully, hopefully, gratefully, believing that the earth holds in her bosom rich stores for the faithful worker to garner, stores richer than gold or silver. The niggardliness laid to her charge is false witness. With proper intelligent cultivation, the earth will yield its treasures for the benefit of man. The mountains and hills are changing. The earth is waxing old like a garment. But the blessing of God, which spreads a table for his people in the wilderness, will never cease. Children can get excited about produce, and they do, especially if there are things that they grew. Sorry. All right, so here are our girls. I think Susanna has some zucchini in her hand, and Sarah has one big tomato that she was excited about showing to us. Sweet potatoes and okra. There's nothing like letting the kids harvest the food and then cook it. They're much more likely to eat it. And you can involve all members of the family. This was one time when Samuel's grandmother came to visit us, and we got her out on the tractor, at least for the picture. But she loved being with us and seeing what we were doing. And this is a picture of my parents' place. My parents love gardening. They always have a huge garden. I see my dad's face is not turned where you can actually see him in this picture, but I'm the youngest of 3 children, and my dad was so excited that I was interested in gardening because my brother and sister hated it. And he has always loved, being in the greenhouse. He used to grow flowers and sell them, and we would grow produce and take it to the farmer's market. And my mother is a farmer's daughter. So I appreciate very much what my parents gave me in giving me the opportunity to be in the garden. Nice. Samuel's parents are also gardeners. His dad especially loves being in the garden. Whenever it is possible, parents should have a piece of land connected with the home that the children may learn to cultivate the soil. How many beautiful and valuable lessons may be drawn from preparing the ground, sowing the seed, and tending the growing plants. In learning these lessons, parents and children are benefited and blessed. These are pictures of us with Enoch. He's picking blueberries at the top with Dad and blackberries at the bottom there. There are our girls picking some pretty flowers and some more produce that we were excited about. Pumpkins and tomatoes. And as you know, a couple of years ago, we added a new sweet face who we quickly introduced to gardening, which he loves. Taking the children outdoors in nature, in the garden or near the garden, is so good for them because it just helps them to have clearer minds, and they can enjoy the blessings that God gives us. You have time to think. A couple of summers ago, we again had an opportunity to sell at the farmer's market. There is a market here some of you may know about on King Street that is from May to October, which my boys and I will be selling at again this summer. We had opportunity to do that a couple of summers ago, and this is a picture of that. And it's also, there's a picture there of Daniel with our corn, part of our corn harvest this past summer, and one of our flowers. And this is a picture of some of our produce from last summer, as well as a little highway that Daniel made in the garden. As we mentioned, the little ones can find many things to do out in the garden. We don't have to feel like, we have to put them in a box. We can just let them go and play and get their hands in the mud and catch the frogs and the praying mantises, and just let them be free and explore the outdoors. It's so good for them, and they'll have such good memories of the garden, and they will want to do what you're doing. They will want to plant the seeds, and they'll want to help with the weeds. When they're really little, you just have to help, make sure they know which ones are the weeds and which ones are the plants. But let them feel like they're part of what you're doing, and don't feel like they're a thorn in your side and that you can't garden because you have kids. Just understand that things may go slower or be a little bit more difficult. Like Nanette said, it's good to start small and to be realistic. but definitely do something. You know, doing something is good, and it's good for the children. It's good for all of us. We will look forward to sharing more next Sunday, March the 21st at 2 o'clock. I have something I want to share with you. How many of you have heard of the Adventist Agriculture Association? A few people, okay. About 7 years ago, maybe, they started an Adventist Agriculture Association where they've been having a yearly convention and getting together like from a Wednesday or Thursday, I forget which, I think it's Wednesday to Sunday, and talking about gardening, various aspects of gardening, anywhere from home gardeners to farmers. Many people are interested in it. We were able to attend about 3 of those conferences. They actually had one this year. It was much smaller than they have been in the past, but it was out in Texas. Anyway, they have a website that I want to tell you all about. And they also have many of their messages available on Audioverse. How many of you are familiar with Audioverse? Okay, it's an app that you can get on your phone and you can listen to messages free. So there's a promo video that I would like to show you. It's just a couple of minutes, and it's actually 3 years old, but it was really well done. So I want it will just kind of give you a picture of what they're all about. And I think at the end, it has their website. And once that's done, David, did you want to say something once that's finished? Okay. And when David's finished, before we head down to supper, I wanted to invite anyone who would like to have some of these carrots to just come up and take a handful. I'm sorry I don't have bags, but you're welcome to just come up and take a handful of carrots. We brought them to share. We dug them up from our garden. When was that? On Thursday. God blessed us very richly with some great carrots. So hope you enjoy them too. Monica.
I just want to ask if we're going to have session when we discuss how to preserve them, both in canning and or maybe cellar. To me, it's a very new thing, especially how to preserve roots.
That is definitely something that will be in our plans. Yes. Okay.
I want to add something. I watched a video last week. Somebody recommended it. His name is Paul Gauchi, and it's called Back to Eden. It's about wood chips or mulch that he uses, and he says he doesn't have to weed, he doesn't have to even water or fertilize it, and it doesn't have to fill it. If he uses that enough, so it's worth watching.
You want to speak to that?
I don't know if they can make the video, but we really appreciate everyone who come and be part of this. This is the first time we had done, and I'm sure it's a lot of information. Try to gather the information. And that's why we just can't do one seminar. We had to do more. And the next one will be on March 21st. It will be a Sunday at 2 o'clock. And now we're just gonna talk this time we'll do hands-on. We're gonna show you the tools that you need. We're gonna show you how actually to do the planting, to do different things. So actually it's more activity going. You come
start your garden? I'm thankful for Ashley taking notes, and we hope you took notes. So let's pray together. Dear Lord, we thank you for all your creation. We thank you for the opportunity every season to get closer to you through reading and being in your second book. Lord, bless each family here. Bless our gardens and our knowledge as we learn. Teach us, refine our characters for your glory. Make us more like Jesus. We thank you for the Sabbath that we had. In Jesus' name, amen.